Welcome to We Need to Name This, where we unpack the hidden curriculum of academe with scholars of color. I'm Laura Ann Jacobs, and my co-host.
Ebony Bruce Harvey.
And today's episode is entitled, Should You Pursue Your PhD at an HBCU or PWI? And we'd like to start by introducing an amazing Black woman scholar, Dr. Monique Cherry-McDaniel, who will share with us her experiences. But first, we'd like to share a little bit about her. Dr. Monique Cherry-McDaniel has been with teaching work since 2015 at the University of Michigan and currently serves on the English Language Arts team. She spent several years as an associate professor and program coordinator of integrated language arts education at Central State University, and several years as a secondary English and creative writing teacher in Dayton, Ohio. She's conducted professional development and co-taught graduate courses for practicing classroom teachers and provided community education for underserved populations in Cincinnati, Ohio. Her research interests include exploring more effective and socially just ways of teaching canonical texts to diverse learners and using literature to foster critical literacies and fuller forms of citizenship for students who are historically marginalized inside and outside of the classroom. She has authored several articles published in English Leadership Quarterly, English Journal, and Educational Studies. She has a BS in English Education from Central State University and both an MS in Curriculum and Teacher Leadership and a PhD in Educational Leadership from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio.
So welcome. Thank you so much, Monique, for taking some time with us today.
Thank
So
you.
the first thing we want to do, and we start off with our interviews with everyone, is to tell us a little bit about yourself, your area of study, your current position, and what brought you to academia.
Mhm. My area of study is critical literacy. It's incredibly important to me. I was a classroom teacher to begin with. I taught high school English for several years. And one of the things that was very difficult for me is when I first started inviting people into my classroom as pre-service teachers for student teaching experiences and methods experiences. And they were making some of the same mistakes that I had made as a very early career teacher. And there was no intervention that I saw in their programs that would change this at all. And so I thought to myself, well, my mother-in-law always talks about this idea of being a tree, and you bear fruit, and so you have to go where you can bear the fruit that you want to see. So in my mind, I thought, well, let me get into academia so that I could be the person that intervenes on these patterns, and that's what landed me in academia.
Yeah, and so, okay, so I see some of myself in your story too, because I was also a classroom teacher, also seeing inequities happening, also understanding that teachers are really the bridge, right? So we go into teacher education programs and we're the one who teaches them how to teach, right?
Mhm.
So it's really important because they don't come to our programs being teachers, right? They
Right.
come to our programs so they can learn how to be teachers. So it's like it's such a critical point in their trajectory and learning that we really have to take advantage of. And I feel like in some ways we're not really taking advantage in terms of really helping our pre-service teachers become more critical
Mhm.
in their thinking and in their practice. So thank you so much for coming to academia where we need you. All right. So you've had experience at HBCU and you've also been working at a PWI. And so we wanted to get some background on you and just like being at a HBCU and it being a place where you got your PhD and whether like if we are or our audience is thinking about going into academia, if it's a HBCU a good fit for them or PWI is a good fit for them. So we wanted to know a bit about the application process for graduate school. What was that like for you? And did you apply to both PWIs and HBCUs? And then how did you
Mhm.
decide?
Mhm. Um, so I I think it's a little bit more background for me to kind of explain how I found myself,
Yeah.
you know, on my journey. One
Mhm.
thing to know is that I'm first generation.
Okay.
My sisters and I did a lot to take care of each other. We had parents who passed away at a very young age.
Mhm.
And so I did not know. I knew of college. I knew of college from what I saw on TV.
Mhm.
And I applied to undergrad. We had a family friend who went to Central State University, which is a HBCU,
Mhm.
and I fell in love with Central State. It really is the a place where I was able to thrive and understand who I was. But I
Mhm.
did not know about graduate school. I did not know that graduate school existed until I was a junior in undergrad, a
Mhm.
second semester junior in undergrad at that, with a very high GPA, very active. I was the SGA president 2 years in a row, and I did not know what that there was a step after this
Mhm.
until I was in a English class, and my professor, his name was McGregor Coleman, told me about his experience as a graduate student, and I fell in love, and I started to look for how to get in, what to do, and I only applied to two graduate schools. I applied to Miami University, which is they consider it a public Ivy, and I
Mhm.
applied to Wright State University in Ohio. And I went to Miami because there was a bridge program that had just got started between Central State and Miami University, and that's how I landed there. And I think that was the less than intentional move I made. But it was definitely an uphill battle to learn, like you said, this hidden curriculum about graduate school and academia, because it wasn't it wasn't part of my conversation. It wasn't part of my world.
Mhm. And it's interesting because a number of people of color that I've spoken to, particularly Black folks, say, I never thought about a PhD program. I had no idea. Like, I didn't know. I knew about like getting your bachelor's and your master's. You know what I mean? Because it was like related to teaching. Like, you get your bachelor's and then you get your master's to,
Mhm.
move up the salary ranks. And that's kind of all I knew.
Mhm.
But I knew that I had professors at school, but I never thought that, oh, they have a PhD. I just knew they were professors and that's their job and they teach me. So it wasn't until like I went on my own journey and then it was like, oh, there's this other level, right? Because in my family are immigrants. So I was also first generation um, college student. And so my whole generation, like my cousins stuff, we all went to like college at the same time. You know what I'm saying? So we were kind of learning,
Mhm.
as we go.
Mhm.
And so like I didn't learn about a PhD until like I was teaching, like way into my teaching career. I was like 8 years teaching. It's like I'm finding about a PhD. So yeah, it's so important. So tell me a bit about your experience in your PhD program at a HBCU. You said that an HBCU really helped you really solidify who you are and know who you are and be confident in who you are. And so tell us about your experience at a HBCU in a PhD program.
So one thing to be clear, Miami isn't a HBCU, it's a PWI.
Oh, it's a PWI. Okay.
Undergrad at a
Which
HBCU,
BCU? Okay.
and all of my graduate work is at a PWI.
Okay.
Um, and the experience between those two places was very, very different. Um, at my HBCU, it was history everywhere. It was purpose, it was ritual everywhere. We started um, our freshman year with the candlelight ceremony, and the the message behind that ceremony is that people are going to try to blow your candle out, but you have to stick together and you have to work against all odds to remain a light in the world. And those are the kinds of things that peppered my experience at a HBCU, and it made it really easy for me to work through the other kinks
Mhm.
that are there, the lack of resources that was part of my experience, um, the lack of information that was available to me in that space, is something that I remember, and I really worked hard to intervene on when I was a professor at that same university. But when I went to Miami, the things that I thought were important, the things that made me feel like part of a community, that wasn't part of the experience. But what I did like about that is that there's a common belief, and it's a common sense belief that you deserve to have what you need to succeed. And that was mind blowing to me, actually. Like, nothing was difficult. I remember two very important experiences that I used to tell my students at Central State is one, I never touched a door that wasn't open, that was locked, and how that made me more confident. Like, I literally, like, every door that I walked up to on Miami's campus was unlocked and accessible to me. I could walk in and I could know that if I touched this door, I wasn't going to have to turn around embarrassed and walk a different way and find a different way into a building. And that was mind blowing to me. And I did not realize how psychologically damaging it was to be on a campus that I paid thousands of dollars to be on and not have access to the basic things. Like, I couldn't get into the library at certain times, or I couldn't get into a computer lab at certain times. But at Miami, every door at any time was open to me. Um, and another thing I remember is applying to graduate. The lady laughed at me because she said, I walked in, I said, I'm ready to graduate. I need to apply for graduation. What do I do? And she gave me a postcard. And she said, put your phone number, your email address, and your name, and put it in that box over there. And I was like, and then what? And she was like, that's it. And I'm like, no, I'm not in the mood to play games with you. I have driven an hour to get here. I need to do all of the things this afternoon to graduate. And she was like, you just did all of the things, ma'am. We'll take it from here. And I called like once a week until graduation. And I'm like, did I do everything? Because this lady just gave me a postcard and she told me I was done. And I just can't fathom that that's the only hoop that I have to jump through. And they were like, yeah, you're done. We have a system that's integrated and we see all of the things that you've done and you're done. And that's it. But the things that I found difficult was just a lack of community, and a lack of a collectively understood purpose, you know.
Yeah, I do think that academia, at least being in a PWI, because I've only gone to PWIs, it's very individualistic.
Mhm.
It's like, like it's very like, you got to, do your own thing. And, there's no one to catch you if you fall. You got to figure out if you can find the resources or if you even know the resources are available.
Right, right.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So I'm going to pass it off to Laura Ann.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing about your experience. I heard you saying like a lot of things about community and support, and like, the ritual and culture piece with the candle walk is so powerful. And I was wondering, especially with your experience starting at an HBCU for undergrad and moving into a PWI, you're saying like there's things that were unexpected to me, and like, why are these doors, literal and figurative doors, locked? And I'm wondering if you have maybe recommendations uh, for maybe undergraduate students of color at HBCUs who are thinking of PWIs. Like, what types of things do you look for when you're moving into, a higher degree and considering a PWI? Like, what types of things would you recommend that people look for to ensure that they have supportive community, that are like the signs and the signals that you say, like, I could be supported here. Like, people will see me and love me and honor me here. Like, what types of things do you see there?
Um, you want to know that there's someone there that's going to be explicit with you. Um, that one of the things that I struggle with, and I really wish would change about the culture of academia is the lack of explicitness. And it seems almost purposeful that it is that way. And
Mhm.
so if I were giving anybody advice on how to choose a school, whether it was a HBCU or PWI, is are there people available to you that will understand what it means to be lacking cultural capital,
Mhm.
and that is not it is not a testament to your intelligence, or it's not a testament to your potential for success. It is simply a barrier that you lack the information, and the information can easily be given to you if
Mhm.
you have people who are um, willing to give it to you explicitly. Hey, I know you don't know this, but you're probably going to want to make some relationships with some professors, and that relationship needs to include ways that you talk about opportunities they can offer you, because professors have these opportunities for research and these opportunities for travel abroad, and they don't just put a flyer out for you like you might be accustomed to. You actually have to have a relationship with them for them to mention it, to even mention it to you, or for them to even see you as a potential candidate for these opportunities. Like, those are the simple things that you should be looking for, is people who are willing to invest in you and to see that your lack of cultural capital isn't it is a very easy issue to fix, very easy issue to address.
Do you think that is just like with advisor relationships, or you mentioned reaching out to other professors? Like what about if someone has, they maybe have support from their advisor, but for all like their experiences kind of feels very defeating. Like, how do they reach out to maybe other faculty or learn about, about other people like who could support them?
I think that's a part of the work. And I think it turns into somewhat of an intergenerational project, because what 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 I noticed is that, for students of color, they're gonna we find ourselves attracted to professors of color, and oftentimes professors of color have to carry the burden of advising every student of color, officially or unofficially.
Yep.
This burden is different on women of color, who now we're essentially mammifying them and cutting off their legs as they're building their career, because now, I have to carry the weight of mentoring and advising every person of color graduate student that comes to me. Otherwise, they won't get the mentorship. But now I'm stretched too thin. So now I cannot mentor them the way they need to be mentored. And so we start this cycle over again. And so I think it's important to have intergenerational conversations about what does it look like to have a desire to support and for me, I'm specifically thinking about Black women. How am I going to support every Black woman that comes to my door and still write, still research, still teach, still deal with microaggressions from my colleagues every day? What do I need to do in order to set us all up for success? Maybe I need to create a network of other, Black women professors that I could say, hey, I can't take on another student, but I know someone else who has similar interests, or who's available, that I could connect you with, and we could create some network around. And then it's also about branching out and seeing allies and other people of color, and being able to leverage the knowledge that you have, trade the knowledge that you have, so that everybody could be successful. It, you know, Ebony, you said is very individualistic. Some people call it entrepreneurial, which really is a problem for me. But let's use that word. So entrepreneurial, you got to build a network, right? In
Mhm.
order for you to be able to sell yourself. So how do you build the network that will put you, in the room and at the
Mhm.
table with people who have the resources and the opportunities that you need to set you up for the next level, because it's the lack of knowledge about the next level that keeps us um, less than prepared.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nobody said, hey, uh, you should be publishing now so that you could put that on your PhD application, your application to PhD programs. That
Mm-hmm.
that is an easy thing to just to say.
Mm-hmm.
Ought to be thinking about this,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not said. It's not something that is you know explicit to people. So I think the extent that you see possibilities to build a network that is both supportive to your professional aspirations and also supportive of your mental, emotional, and psychological health going through this process, that is a place where you ought to be trying to get.
Thank you. Ebony, I have another question.
Oh yeah,
Can I
go,
go
go
again?
for it.
I know. Yeah, thank you. I wanted to also, I was thinking about what you said about, um, you know, your experience at Central State. You're just so filled with like confidence of being like the SGA president, and like, I think too, like, um, when I started, grad school, I feel like kind of confident, feel pretty good. I feel like my own personal confidence was kind of, it's been a little bit of a downward roller coaster most of the time, as I reach the end. And certainly had to do things to try to stay confident in my work and like view myself as a strong person and see
Mhm.
community around me. And yeah, so especially because you really emphasized that at Central State, and then kind of talked about moving in, into into your grad school institution. I was wondering, you know maybe what advice you might have for people about like maintaining that confidence and that assurance that like you are an expert, like you were a classroom teacher, you do know about education, like you know what you're doing and you know what you're talking about. And like some of this experience, maybe, I don't know, will we cut this later? I don't know, but some of it is about like kind of hazing you to make you believe that you don't know what you're talking about, and only through this help and this hardship and this like drilling and meetings can then we make you the diamond you've meant to, that you couldn't have become without us, but maybe you were already diamond anyway. So that's a long-winded way to ask the question about like, how, what advice do you give just to, students of color that would, say, I don't know if this is for me. These people are, maybe I'm not an expert. They're telling me I'm not, maybe I don't. Like, how do you stay so confident? Especially I've, like I said, I've read your writing. The thing that stands out to me is like, oh yeah, yes, Dr. Monique Cherry-McDaniel knows what she's talking about. There's like strength in here, and there's confidence and assurance and expertise. Like, how do you keep that voice?
Mhm. I think I think that is in community too, and I think it's being able to hear other people's voices and hear other people's experiences that help you to anticipate the blow or help you to navigate as quickly as possible, because sometimes it's not a quick thing to recover after you have been dealt a blow. I remember like it was yesterday. My first semester in my PhD program, I was working with a group of three on a paper. One person was a math educator. I think he might have been an assistant principal at that time. And one was an older woman who was a career student because her husband worked at the university. And so she, found herself enjoying the ability to explore education free. And then there was me, a English teacher for 7 years with a degree in English education. And I was having to argue with them about comma placement. And I'm like, wait a minute, I teach this every single day. Like I actually teach kids how to write every day, and comma placement is not a very difficult thing to do. And I'm arguing with you all over comma placements, and
Mm,
I'm arguing with you all over how to turn this paper that we're co-writing into a paper with a single voice that we all can be proud of.
mhm,
And you're fighting me every step of the way, because what you're really communicating to me is that as a Black woman, I don't have the right to claim myself as an expert of the English language.
mhm,
And I can't tell the difference between uh, a run on sentence or not. And I'm like, okay, that was one that I had to talk to somebody on the am I crazy
mhm,
conversation. Like that is
mhm,
the most damaging part
mhm,
of it, is you actually start uh, questioning your own sanity and whether you see what you see and
mhm,
know what you know. And I think the easiest way for me to that I learned to work through that is to be in community with people where we shared our stories,
mhm,
um, and where our similar questions were being answered for one another. Um, I had a colleague, and I started to look up her dissertation so I could mention it to you all. She wrote about Black women working through graduate programs as her dissertation, and I remember her saying that she asked for additional monies to for books and things like that, and our one of our administrators basically said, you don't need any extra money because as a woman, you're married and you have a husband that should be taking care of you. On the other hand, this person in the program who's a man, that's who we want to give the additional resources to, because he has a family that he's supporting. I mean, it was a very interesting thing. And she's like, am I hearing this correctly? Because this level of blatant discrimination can't be possible. It can't be possible. Like, Monique, am I misreading this, or
mm,
am I a victim here?
mm,
And it's those instances where we both came to the conclusion that let's share our stories so it
mm,
doesn't fester, and so that we can assure each other of how we should be thinking and feeling and responding to these things. um, and that was really helpful to help with confidence. It's also another major thing is to balance your life, which is difficult. um, I had to begin to balance my life with and remind myself that I'm more than this process. I'm more than a student. I'm more than a professor, because it actually doesn't stop after you graduate with a degree. You are still going to face these same kinds of issues where you feel like, am I good enough? Did I make a mistake? Am I swimming in water that's too deep for me? You're still going to ask those questions of yourself, but it helps me to look around my life and say, you know what, I'm a good friend. I'm a good sister. I'm a good mother. I'm a good wife. I'm a good minister. I'm a good all of these things. I use all of these skills in multiple spaces. So, yeah, no. Today, that's not going to work.
So when you say community, our questions have been about finding community at your graduate school. And I'm hearing you right now say community is like, nah, community is like the community of your life, right? The
It is.
community of your family, yeah, the community of your social groups. And the
Mhm.
thing, so much of what you do that is not actually your degree, it's not your teaching, it's not your career, it's not your advisor, it's not your other grad students. It's about like the community and the wholeness of who you are outside of that, is what I'm hearing you say.
Mhm. And how you allow that to shape your purpose. That's another thing. Be be clear and resolute in what you're doing here. And you'll always get people to say, well, maybe you should be writing about this, or this doesn't feel like a complete enough project. And this, I don't think you'll find enough research on this. And maybe you should write for this audience. No, thank you. I have been very clear. I've written down for myself. I constantly review it to make sure that this is still the path that I want to be traveling. This is still the voice that I want to write in. This is still the voice that I want to present in. This is still the convictions that I have that is going to undergird my teaching philosophy and the way that I relate to my students. Be very clear about those things, because you'll have people and you'll have reminders that this isn't the right audience, or this isn't the right venue, or this isn't the right tone, or this isn't the right research. But if you have written down, I write for people to pick up my work and find themselves in it, and I'm not interested in writing over anybody's head. I'm writing about teachers, I'm writing about students, so they ought to be able to understand it. So no, I'm not digging out multi-syllabic words just for you to feel good about it. You have to you have to rest in, this is who I am, and it's not separated from my humanity, my identity as a scholar, my identity as a teacher, my identity as all of these things. It's not separated from my identity as a woman. It's not separated from my identity as a community member. It's not separated from my religious affiliation. I do this for a purpose, and my purpose does not have to make you feel good. It does not have to be um, endorsed by you. You're my advisor. You had a path. You walked your path. Let me walk mine.
So you said a number of powerful things. So I'm gonna pick up on a few of the things that you said. So one thing that you mentioned is shaping our purpose. So one thing that I notice in academia is we're often asked to separate those aspects because of, this idea of objectivity, and having to argue why we're subjective. And so in your work, especially being at a PWI, how did you navigate those conversations and made sure to be really clear, like, this is my purpose, or this is what I'm planning to do, regardless, because power is at play, right? So when you have an advisor, when you have other professors who are supposed to be mentoring you, et cetera, there's this element of power that's in the room that we don't talk about. So how did you navigate those difficult conversations?
Mhm. Um, I think this is a it's a mechanism that I've used for a very long time, which is always planning for the places where I'm not strong at. And one of the places where I'm not strong at is um, is those encounters,
Mm.
really. And so one of the things that I always did was create sentence stems for myself
Mm.
that helped me to navigate those situations, gave me some space to think and regulate my breathing and regulate my heart rate, because it all of those things come into play, like, fear, anxiety, afraid of being rejected, afraid of being reassigned to another advisor, afraid of being blocked by an advisor. I got to do my third chapter again. Like,
Mm.
those things are real. So I would find myself, and some of these were given to me by other people. So one of my best mentors, her name is Lisa Weems, and she would say, people are going to ask you about why you've narrowed down your dissertation to these three images of Black womanhood, and they're going to ask you, where are you dealing with LGBTQ issues, where are you dealing with class, where are you dealing with location and nationhood. And you need to be able to say to them, I thank you for your suggestion. I love your research. That is something you research. And this is what I am researching. Like, we had literal sentence stems.
Mhm.
And we practiced together, where she would say, Monique, I noticed that you did not quote this particular scholar. And I really think that you should. And the exercise was for me to calmly be able to say, I really appreciate that suggestion, but it was a deliberate decision not to quote that particular scholar. And this is why I chose to quote these particular scholars.
Mhm.
And so I'm indebted to her
Mhm.
for helping me realize that that was a skill that I could continue to use, is create these sentence stems, create this space so that you can manage your emotions and manage your responses to that very real pressure.
Yeah, thank you. Um, and just from our conversation so far, it seems like it was a more, I guess, like seamless. It was more seamless to find community at a HBCU than maybe a PWI. And let me know if that's correct. And how did you find community at a PWI? Because I think that's something that I think is kind of like a thorough line through all our interviews, is just like, hey, like, how do you find community in the space that's not built for having community or for people to build community? Like, how did you say, okay, I'm in this new space. There are not these opportunities, these events, these things where I can meet other people who have similar interests or similar background. How did you do that at a PWI to sustain yourself?
I think that was a lot of vulnerability,
Mhm.
and realizing that I was not going to be able to do it on my own and be as successful as I wanted to be. And so vulnerability looked like trying new things that I never thought I would try before, even very simple things. Like another story that sticks out to me is going out for sushi. Um, that wasn't a part of my life.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't a part of anything that I wanted to do. But what I noticed is that after, this class got out at 8 o'clock, I was walking to my car and the rest of my colleagues were walking into town to this sushi restaurant. And I'm like, Monique, you gonna have to disrupt this pattern of yours.
Mhm.
Either you could get in your car and drive away and go home, and whatever conversations they're having that you'll never be privy to, that you'll need, you're going to miss those conversations, and that's going to limit you.
Mhm.
Or you can put your keys in your book bag and tag along with them and see, and see what they're talking about. It was very you one of these two roads you go have to travel,
Mhm.
very different outcomes, try it. And so I went out one time, and I
Mhm.
remember, ordering, and this girl very discreetly got up, talked to the waiter, and brought me a fork because
Mhm.
she had anticipated already that I was not going to be able to use chopsticks. And that, I'm sure people will read that story in a number of different ways,
Mhm.
but for me, that saved me.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That was a bit of apprehension that I was having, just sitting there, not even speaking it. Like, what
Mhm.
do I do when this food comes? I don't even like this food, and I don't know how to eat it. Like, this is going to be embarrassing. And maybe she experienced that before, or I don't know what made her do it, but 10 years later, I remember that, and I'm so thankful for her for doing that. And it helps me to do other things. I tried hummus for the first time in grad school. Like,
Me
it was
too.
little things like that, like hummus. I, it was so over meals and commiserating over other experiences that didn't have a lot to do with, our identity politics. Talking to, older people who had all of this wisdom that
Mhm.
was very helpful, but also learning how not to take the position of, you know, of the little person in the group, and bring my gifts and bring my talents and bring my offerings to the table as well, and know that they were just as worthy as everybody else's. Really helps me to build community.
So you're telling us to push outside of our, our comfort zone, so to speak,
Mhm.
and engage in some new experiences that will allow us to build community in places that we wouldn't expect,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
right.
Okay. Cool. So I have a question just to to kind of bring some of the things you've spoken about like together. So we kind of talked about, or we're thinking about like applying to PWIs or applying to HBCUs. Um, what would be some of the affordances, right, to applying and attending an HBCU? What would be some of the affordances for applying and attending a PWI? And what would be some constraints? So as folks look at this and they're thinking about, I'm applying to some PWIs, I'm applying to some I've never thought about applying to HBCU. I've never thought about applying to PWI. What are just some affordances and constraints that you can think of, whether it's related to community, coursework, getting advisement, being able to navigate like the campus or campuses, or navigate just social interactions? What do you see as affordances and constraints, so folks can kind of think about what spaces might be places where they would want to apply to?
Mhm. Um, I think it's important to first interrogate what people believe about HBCUs and the quality of education that you get at HBCUs. That's the first thing that you really kind of have to interrogate your thoughts about. Um, there are lovely programs at HBCUs. There's lots of community at HBCUs. There are lots of opportunities at HBCUs. There may not be as many resources at HBCUs. And so you want to make sure that you're aware of that. The likelihood of you walking in and out of a program with $0 out of your pocket is relatively slim, as opposed to the PWI where there are, a number of fellowships and internships and all kind of opportunities for you to pay for school without paying for school.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing to consider. Another thing to consider is what you want your life to look like holistically. There's some affordances and constraints with those things, and I used to talk to my students who were planning to go to graduate school about that. You have to think about all of the things that matter to you and bring you peace and bring you joy, because you are spending a chunk of your life doing this work. So why are you spending a chunk of your life going to a school and you can't get your hair done in a 50-mile radius? Why are you spending a chunk of your time going to school and you cannot find a decent place to raise a family, that affordable place to raise a family? Why are you going to any school and there isn't prospects for romantic relationships there? Like, those are important things that sometimes people don't think about, but I think it's important to think about, so you could be a whole person while you're there, because you need to be a whole person in order to walk away from this space without having to go straight to therapy afterwards. So I would definitely think about the financial give and take of both of those things. I would think about what kind of life you want to build for yourself before you make a choice. I would think about what you actually want to do. Um, we didn't talk about this, but I think a huge burden for people of color is to prove their worthiness. And one way to do that in this country is through the proliferation of degrees. And you have to say, hey, is this PhD going to help me do what I want to do? Or is this me proving to someone that I'm worthy to exist, or I'm smart? Answer that question, and then move from there. And then finally, um, look for people who are going to willingly and graciously pour into you, not what celebrity professor is at these schools, because that doesn't guarantee you any access. It doesn't guarantee you any benefit. Are you going to be able to learn from this person and be enriched by this person? Not, do you see them at all of the conferences and see their names everywhere?
Especially with those professors, they're so busy because they are celebrities. They're at every conference. They're, always like either on the news or on a show or
Traveling.
starting things themselves, traveling, so then you may not even get the kind of attention that you might need, especially if you're first generation, especially if you're trying to navigate this thing for the first time without any kind of support. So that makes so much sense. Also, something that you said, when I applied to graduate school, I was not thinking about that. Like, where am I gonna get my hair done? I wasn't thinking about any of that. I just knew, like, I was like, okay, I was just looking at these programs, like, okay, and what, and it's so, I think it's so important. Like, if I were to do it again, I think I would end up at Michigan just because, and by happenstance, I found some awesome women of color. Like, it was just like, okay, I'm gonna go to Michigan. I went to visit the campus. I met my advisor. I was like, oh, she's the bomb. I would just come to the school because she was the bomb. And she was just so welcoming and just so cool. And I was like, okay, I know I could rock 5 years with you. You know what I'm saying? And then all these other blessings came. But if I were to do it again, I would think more deeply about, like, oh, where can I get my hair done? Where can I eat my cultural food? Like, literally, I cannot find a good Caribbean restaurant in Ann Arbor, Michigan. No, in an Ipsy. Like, I can't, like, I'm lucky my husband cooks, because then I would only be able to have good Caribbean food when I come to New York. So those things are so important. And those things were things that I didn't even consider, because you're so into the application process and you're thinking about, okay, what program, what professors are there? You know, you're told to think about these very, like, application things, and not like, hey, you got to live a whole life outside of graduate school. And also, you're told that, like, graduate school is your life, so you're not thinking about the fact that, no, graduate school is not your life, it's a part of your life. Therefore, yes, you need to figure out, you know, where you're going to eat, where you're going to spend your free time, like, what do you like to do? Do you have to drive 20 miles just to be able to go to a movie theater? Like, these are things that are super important, and I hadn't even considered. So I'm so glad that you've mentioned it, because it's something that, you know, I didn't even really think about, you know.
And another thing to consider that I will tell my students all the time too is that you have to balance. You have to balance how you see yourself.
Mm,
You see on TV, you see on Instagram, all of these beautiful snippets of people opening up their acceptance letter and jumping around. I got in, I got in. You are a customer.
mhm.
You are a student client,
Oof.
and they cannot exist without you any more than you can exist without them.
Mm,
So act like you are purchasing a 50, 60, 70, $80,000 education, because you are. And
mhm,
even if you're not paying a single dime out of your pocket, your labor is what makes these programs work. So yeah, you pay for it. And
mhm,
so you are a prize too.
mhm,
You know, so act like you have some options. As my grandma would say, act like you've been here before.
mm, mm.
Walk in and let them know
Yep.
this shirt don't fit the way I really want it to.
Mhm,
So what can we do to customize it? What can we do to make this work?
mm. Yeah. Oof. Dropping some gems. I really, really appreciate it, because these are conversations that I wish I had before I even thought about applying. You know what I mean? I knew really specifically what my goals were and what I wanted to achieve. And that came out of teaching for 10 years. I was like, this is the gap I see. This is the gap I want to fill. I went to graduate school like, nobody's gonna take me off the I'm one of I mean this is both a blessing and a curse. I'm one of those people who are like, I have a goal and you are not derailing me from this goal. I might shift over here for 2 seconds, but that's all you getting, because I'm getting right. But that's me. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, you can say whatever you want to say. I see the prize. You know what I'm saying? But everybody's different, right? And sometimes we can get derailed because we're so caught up in what is accepted or expected in graduate school and what other people tell us we should be prioritizing, and not what we want to prioritize. And then we end up spending 7, 8, 9 years in graduate school because we went over here, you know, taking somebody else's advice when we knew when we came in what we wanted to do, you know. So I'm it's just so true. Just so thank you for sharing those words, because it's so true. So true. So I'm going to pass it back to Laura Ann and see if she has any final questions before we go. We have like 1 minute left. So
I know.
but I just want, because we really want to respect your time. We know you have a lot of things to do. So right now, I'm just going to say thank you so much, because you've shared so many like important things that need to be heard and shared.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. It was really a blessing, actually.
Yeah, I'm not gonna since it's set time, I'm not gonna ask another question. I have like a lot of things I would love to ask you, or just spend time together. I don't know if that's a weird thing to say, but yeah, I've enjoyed our time together so much and learned so much from you, and just appreciate you sharing so much about your experience, and like offering so much just like just powerful and authentic advice about staying yourself, your whole self, to other people, that I think is so important, that so many people can learn from. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And this is just giving me an idea for another episode, which is like, like particularly just thinking about like balancing family, right? When you have a partner, or you have children, or you have both, or you are taking care of loved ones, like I feel like that's such an important like episode, the thing to discuss, because sometimes people will not pursue a PhD because they're like, I have these whole other things going on. And is it possible? How can I navigate this? How can I make a decision that's going to be good for my family and also move me forward? So that's just another idea. So we might be sending you another email.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Pick me. Pick me. Yes, that's a necessary one for sure.
So thank you so much.
Yeah,
Really,
thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you all for doing this project. It's going to help so many people. So I'm so thankful that you thought about it and you pursued it.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
we will send you another email, so you will be hearing from us.
All right.
Have a wonderful day.
Yes.
You too. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for We Need to Name This, a series where we unpack the hidden curriculum of academia. Join us for our next episode, Finding Funding, with Dr. Charles Wilkes. For more information, visit www.weneedtonamethis.com.